Hey boys and girls, I'm Pete Burak and welcome to Cathlist. The act of consecration is in and of itself a miracle that takes place at every Catholic Mass. And while we are grateful and appreciative of that miraculous occurrence, today we want to focus on Eucharistic miracles that go beyond transubstantiation. Like this one, in Amsterdam in 1345, a priest was called to give a dying man viaticum, or last Holy Communion, before he died. Given the man's vomiting tendencies, the priest instructed the family to burn the contents if the man did indeed void his stomach. Nice way to say it. The man did throw up afterwards, and the family threw the contents in the fire as instructed. In the morning, one of the women of the family went to rake out the coals from the previous night's fire and found the incorrupt host resting on the grate in a pool of light, meaning it not only survived the fire, but had not been crushed or digested at all by the man who had consumed it. Amsterdam still holds the Stille Omgang, silent walk, in honor of the miracle each year on March 15th. And that, folks, is just one of the 6 lesser-known Eucharistic miracles we'll be talking about today, so stick around. Number 2, in 1263, a priest was celebrating Mass in Bolsena, Italy, just north of Rome, when he began to doubt the validity of transubstantiation. The host in his hands began to bleed, and drops spilled onto the altar cloth, and you can imagine the priest came to believe. This miracle was a major inspiration for Pope Urban IV, instituting the feast of Corpus Christi. The story of the miraculous host of SIENA is pretty remarkable and includes not one, but 2 thefts. In 1730, thieves broke into the Church of St. Francis and stole the gold ciborium. Ciboria usually looking like a chalice with a lid, but used to hold consecrated hosts. Parishioners found the lid to the ciborium, but no bottom and no hosts. The parish prayed for the recovery of the host and ciborium, and 2 days later, a parishioner noticed a host sticking out of the top of the offering box. Can you imagine, like, somebody sneaks back in and like, I don't have any money, but here's a consecrated host, you know. The host matched the other unconsecrated hosts from St. Francis Church based on the baking marks, and they were cleaned and were placed in a receptacle to deteriorate on their own. However, to everyone's surprise, the hosts never deteriorated. Experiments were devised to study this phenomenon. Some were consumed 50 years later and were found to be fresh and incorrupt. This is a 50-year-old host. Tell us how it tastes. Delicious. 60 years later, they were examined with microscopes, perfectly intact. A control study of unconsecrated hosts were locked in a box and left for 10 years, after which the unconsecrated hosts were examined and were found to be disfigured, discolored, and withered. The final battery of tests occurred in the 20th century as a collaboration between scientists and the Church. Acid and starch tests showed normal levels, despite all evidence showing that they should have long since broken down in a matter of years. The perfect preservation was even more remarkable. But I promise you not just miracles, but thievery. Having not learned their lesson from the 1700s, in 1950, the hosts were transferred into an elaborate, expensive, ornately decorated ciborium for display. And this fancy-pantsy ciborium proved too irresistible and was stolen on August 5th, 1951. Fortunately, this time the thief had dumped the hosts inside the tabernacle and absconded with only the ciborium. The hosts are still occasionally displayed, especially on the Feast of Corpus Christi. One famous miracle involves a heretic challenging St. Anthony of Padua, who, as you know from watching that episode of Cathlist, was known as the Hammer of the Heretics. In this story, the heretic named Bonillo devised a contest for St. Anthony. Bonillo starved a donkey for 3 days. Poor donkey. At the end of these days, Anthony would provide the Blessed Sacrament and stand 20 feet away from the donkey, and the merchant would place a bale of hay the same distance away. The contest was to see if St. Anthony, using the power of Jesus' presence in the Eucharist, could command the donkey to come to him rather than the hay. All was agreed upon, and when the heretic untied the donkey, St. Anthony commanded it in the name of Jesus to come to him and adore the donkey's creator. The donkey, which had been walking toward the hay, stopped short, turned around, and walked directly over to St. Anthony, where it then bent its forelegs, bowed its head toward the ground.
That'll do, donkey. That'll do.
The heretic was understandably astounded and immediately begged forgiveness and converted. Iris, you worked on a farm for years. Is that typical donkey behavior? Iris says no. Miracle! In 1996, not too long ago, Father Alejandro Pezet had just finished saying Mass in Buenos Aires, Argentina, when a woman told him she had found an abandoned host on a candle holder in the back of the church. Rather than consuming it, Father Alejandro deposited it in a jar of water to disintegrate and locked the jar in the tabernacle. A week later, Father Alejandro retrieved the jar and was stunned to see that the host had changed into a bloody substance. The local cardinal had it professionally photographed, but kept it a secret for several years, which is sort of strange. But maybe he didn't trust the miracle himself and wanted to see if anything would happen. Finally, he decided to have it scientifically analyzed in a blind study by a cardiologist and forensic pathologist named Dr. Frederick Zabiga, wherein the analyst would not know the source of the tissue being analyzed. He analyzed it and declared it human tissue that contained human DNA. Not only that, it was heart tissue from the wall of the left ventricle, the part of the heart that constricts and pumps blood throughout the body. Not only that, but he noted that the tissue sample was inflamed and contained a large number of white blood cells consistent with samples that were taken while the heart was still alive. Not only that, but the penetration of the white blood cells throughout the tissue suggested that the donor was not only alive, but under great stress at the time the sample was taken. It was as if the donor had received blunt force trauma to the chest. When he was finally told where the sample had come from, Dr. Zabiga could not provide any scientific explanation, but stood by his analysis. And finally for now, Avignon, France, in 1433. A church run by Franciscans was displaying a host for perpetual adoration when torrential storms lasted several days and buffeted the region, causing the rivers in the area to flood. The Franciscans were forced to evacuate, and in what must have been the oversight of the century, left the host. No word on what the punishment was for the hapless monk who blew it on that job. You had one job, Brother Tyler, one job. So the head of the order and another friar rowed out to the site of the church expecting to have it been washed away, and while the water around the church was 4 feet high, the church was unharmed. Not only that, which I've said a lot this episode, there was a perfectly dry pathway leading to the door of the church, wherein the Franciscans discovered the host untouched. Well, that does it for this week's episode of Cathlist. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Pete Burak. I will see you next week. God bless you. Nope, no help. You're just listening at the door, waiting for the moment where you can spring.
Every second.
You just got like one of those.
Short a comma. I will provide a comma.
Thank you.
Or an exclamation point.
Yeah. Or an ellipses.
Or a bit of pause.
Ooh, I like it.